So absolute value inequalities are a little bit different. The absolute value of a number is the distance from the origin, but now we're going to look at the absolute value not equal to a number, but in comparison either greater than or less than to a number, okay? And so for this one, I have that what's inside could possibly be less than 3. That makes sense, okay? So what's inside could be less than 3, but there comes a point where that's no longer true. Let's take -5, for example. Does -5 still make this original statement true? Absolute value is less than 3. If I plug in a -5 here, we have a problem. That's not less than 3. The absolute value of -5 is +5, which is not less than 3. And so you get all the way until the opposite, that -3, and then all of a sudden you have to stop there. So really what you're telling me when you look at an inequality is if it's less than a number, if the absolute value is less than a number, it's going to be less than that number and greater than the opposite of that number. It's going to be an and piece. It's going to be an and. So it's going to end up being, when you have the absolute value of something like this, it's going to end up being, yes, x is less than 3. And x is greater than -3. So it's always going to be an and when it's less than the one that it gave you and the opposite of the negative, all right? And that's actually how you set these up. Let's look at this one when it's greater than. Let's look at what happens when it's greater than. Well, I'm saying what's inside is greater than or equal to 3. That is true, all right? But then we have to consider what I could do on the other side. If I were to choose a number, so if I were to say, okay, greater than or equal to 3, let's choose 7 over here. If I were to plug that in, absolute value of 7 is greater than or equal to 3. Yeah, that's true. So all of these numbers are true, but I have something else that works too. Over here, let's say I were to choose -7, all right? -7 is greater than or equal to 3 when I put absolute value around it. Yeah, that's also true. And so when I have a greater than sign, it actually ends up being an or. It's going to be what's inside is greater than 3. That is true. Or what's inside can be less than or equal to -3. And so with absolute value inequalities, you end up setting 2 absolute values. All right? You set it up what's inside with the way it was given, and then you flip the greater than less than and do the negative. So let's look at the example here. Look at this example really quickly. All right, example 1. Use a disjunction or a conjunction. All right, they've given it to me up here. If I start out with a greater than, if I start out with a greater than, it is going to be an or. Or is a disjunction, okay? If I start out with a less than, once it's by itself, it is going to be an and, a conjunction. So let's look at this first one. Greater than. Started out as greater than. Is this or and? Greater than. Is it or and? Look at your shortcut up there. Or. So I'm going to say the x is greater than 1. Or the x is less than -1. Let's look at the next one. Less than or equal to. Is that or and for less than? What's it tell me? And. So that means my x is less than or equal to 4. And my x is greater than or equal to -4. All right? So that's how we're going to do all of these equations. We're going to get it by itself, and then we're going to decide, is it and or? And then we're going to do exactly what we did for our quiz with an and or inequality. So let's look at the next couple of examples. Look at example 2. Okay? They want me to solve and graph the absolute value of x plus 5 is less than or equal to 10. So the first thing I need to look at is this less than or equal to. Is that or and? Go back to your next page if you need to. Less than or equal to, or and. And. So I'm going to do like I did with the equations. I'm going to take what is inside x plus 5, and I'm going to make it look exactly the way they gave it to me. Less than or equal to 10. And then this is an and because it was less than. And I'm going to write what's inside. I am going to flip my sign. It was less than or equal to. I'm going to make it greater than or equal to. Okay? And then I am going to change this from a positive 10 to a negative 10. So it's very similar to your equations. You're going to set up two, one with the positive, one with the negative. The difference is you are going to flip this greater than less than on your second one, on your negative one. Once you set up these two, you just solve them. So I'm going to do what to solve. What do I do to solve here? Subtract my 5. All right, I have x is less than or equal to 5. Subtract my 5. I get x is greater than or equal to negative 15. And then you just have to figure out if this is an and, so I want where they cross over, okay? So I want where they cross over to graph it. So I start at the 5 closed circle and go less than. I start at, let's pretend I have a negative 15 down here. He's way down here. Start at negative 15 closed circle and go that way. It means they're going to cross over in between. So I'm going to go negative 15 closed circle, positive 5 closed circle, where they cross over. Just like you would have graphed before. You're solving 2. It's just like the equalities. You're just setting up 2 and you're flipping your signs. All right? Look at example 3. All right, so for this one, the absolute value has to be by itself. So if they had anything on the outside, I would move it. Once the absolute value is by itself, I'm going to look at this greater than. Is greater than or and. Greater than is or, okay? So once I have the absolute value by itself, I decide if I have an or an and then I set up 2. What is inside? Negative 3x plus 6, exactly the way it gave it to me, greater than 18. And then I take what's inside. What am I going to change this to? It was greater than. What am I going to change it to? Less than. What am I going to change this to? Negative 18. And now I have a solving, right? Over here, what do I do to solve? Subtract my 6. I have negative 3x is greater than, what's 18 minus 6? 12. My last step over here. Divide by negative 3. What happens when I divide by a negative 3? What happens here? So less than, what's 12 divided by negative 3? Negative 4, and I have an or. Again, I'm going to subtract 6. I have negative 3x is less than negative 24. Divide by negative 3. And again, I'm going to flip it, right? X is greater than 8. X is greater than 8, right? This is my answer. It's an or, so they do not have to cross, and they won't. Negative 4, open or closed circle at negative 4. Open or closed? Open, and smaller or bigger? Smaller. Open or closed circle at 8. Open and smaller or bigger? There we go. And that is my answer.